Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Year's Best Dark Fantasy and Horror, Volume 2. Edited by Paula Guran. Narrated by Julienne and James Fouhey. Introduction. Stranger Days. Paula Guran. Horror is everywhere. It's in fairy tales and the evening headlines. It's in the street corner gossip and the incontrovertible facts of history. It's in playground ditties. Ring a Ring o' Roses is a sweet little plague song. It's on the altar bleeding for our sins. Clive Barker, A through Z of Horror. It has been, as I write this, almost exactly 1 year since the World Health Organization declared a global pandemic and the United States entered a lockdown. It has also been almost exactly 1 year since I began the introduction, Strange Days, to the previous volume of this series with this. These are unsettling times. The world changed forever as I compiled this anthology, and we don't yet know what it has changed into. Why, some must be asking, would anyone want to read dark fantasy or horror while a pandemic rages, the economy, and who knows what else, topples, and people are dying and suffering? Did I answer the question? If you weren't perspicacious enough to read last year's anthology, tisk, you can still buy the book and find out, or read that introduction on my website, paulaguran.com. I'm not the only one to have had similar thoughts. A recent study's title, Pandemic Practice, Horror Fans and Morbidly Curious Individuals Are More Psychologically Resilient During the COVID-19 Pandemic, sums up its results and answer to the question. The researchers found that horror fiction may not lead you to find ways to enjoy your life during a pandemic. It might help you learn how to deal with the fear and anxiety that stems from something like a pandemic. This may be true, and it ties into the traditional view of horror. We enjoy it because it gives us a type of closure. The bad stuff, the monsters, the evil is destroyed, or at least controlled. Order, or some semblance of it, is restored. Restoring order, however, is not always the aim of modern dark fiction. As Gina Whisker writes in her 2004 essay, Demisting the Mirror, Contemporary British Women's Horror, horror explores the fissures that open in our everyday lives and destabilizes our complacency about norms and rules. It also has a politicized role as an exposer of social and cultural deceits and discomforts. Horror can comfort and give us a feeling of control, but it also challenges and discomforts, even in these challenging and uncomfortable times. Horror, I'm sure someone has noted, is nothing if not paradoxical. Before we go too much further, it's probably best to mention, as I do almost annually, that I'm not offering a definition of dark fantasy, or horror for that matter. You can read last year's introduction on that point, or, more directly, the very first introduction to this series from the Year's Best Horror in Dark Fantasy 2010. What the hell do you mean by dark fantasy and horror? Also republished on the aforementioned website. And, of course, a reminder that although this is Volume 2, it is really Volume 12, as the series started in 2010, covering stories first published in 2009. The title change is due to a publisher change, from Prime Books to Per Books. Back to less practical matters. During the last year, the horrific daily intruded on the mundane, but that's the thing about horror, and dark fantasy, weird fiction, or what have you. It is rooted not only in the fantastic of nightmares and the imagination, but in everyday real life. But, given the circumstances, has my and/or our perception of what horror is changed in the last year? I don't have an answer, of course. Maybe after time has passed, there will eventually be one. But in the very short-term retrospective, after reading hundreds of stories, selecting 30, and offering another 200 as recommended, I have some random observations. It wasn't until after I started assembling this volume that I realized how often homes, houses, and other domiciles played important roles in many of the selected stories. None of them are traditional haunted house tales, but the concept of home popped up more often than I had initially realized. considering most of us have been home more than usual lately, this is interesting. I often choose stories set in the future, and I did so again this year. About half a dozen times. But in some cases, the futures involved seem so close, so logical, that I'm not sure they can really be considered science fiction. In a few cases, there's more of the supernatural involved in the future than science. Along those lines, although the stories are not all science fictional, 3 stories involve the human genetic code, and 3 climate change. Again, because the stories are all wildly different, I didn't realize this until final compilation. My purview for these volumes is expansive. I've never concentrated on horror per se, never really sought stories guaranteed to scare, and certainly not those that merely shock. My shtick tends toward tales that disturb, unsettle, disrupt, discomfort, intrude, etc. That's not changed, but I wonder if there was an overall trend this last year toward, well, just dark, as opposed to horror. Or maybe it's just that there's a wider range of publications now featuring dark, but not necessarily horror, fiction. Along those lines, if you look at the sources of selected and recommended works, which you should and seek them out, you'll find a wide variety of publications. Many of them are not places one would expect to find horror or dark fantasy, yet there it is. Is darkness creeping deeper into literature, or do I find it because I am looking? In the last few years, genre fiction has finally become more diverse, and more publishing opportunities have become available for writers who are not white, do not have an exclusively Western perspective, are not heterosexual, and who are not cisgender male. Consequently, the cultural milieu and characters portrayed have broadened. This positive trend has continued in the last year, and, as always, is reflected in my selections. Have I chosen more of it? I don't know, but I feel I have a great deal more to choose from. I didn't realize until after biographies were assembled that about 20 of the 30 stories included are by writers who identify as women. I don't think this is the first time the contents have had a female majority, but I think that is the largest margin. An aspect of both the preceding point and what Whisker refers to as politicized are the couple of blatantly feminist stories and several others with more subtle messages of that type. Again, nothing new for me or this series, but maybe, or maybe not, notable. Far too early for this one, but I warned you this was random. Dystopic and other science fiction often supposes governmental upheaval, although I don't think anyone ever imagined a president of the United States denying he was defeated in a free, fair, and secure election, and then urging a mob to attack Congress. But after the January 6, 2021 assault on the Capitol by Trump-supporting insurrectionists, one can't but wonder if this will play into dark fiction now. Stories directly inspired by the pandemic did not, of course, start being published until later in 2020. That said, we suitably started Volume 2 with a COVID-19-based tale by Victor Laval, who was commissioned along with 28 others by the New York Times to write new short stories inspired by the moment. They were inspired by Giovanni Boccaccio's The Decameron, written as the plague ravaged Florence in the 14th century. And that's probably an excellent note on which to end the introducing. And start with the reading. Paula Guran, National Respect Your Cat Day, 2021. Recognition. Victor Laval. Not easy to find a good apartment in New York City, so imagine finding a good building. No, this isn't a story about me buying a building. I'm talking about the people, of course. I found a good apartment and a great building in Washington Heights. 6-story tenement on the corner of 180th and Fort Washington Avenue. A 1-bedroom apartment, which was plenty for me. Moved in December 2019. You might already see where this is going. The virus hit, and within 4 months, half the building had emptied out. Some of my neighbors fled to second homes or to stay with their parents outside the city. Others, the older ones, the poorer ones, disappeared into the hospital 12 blocks away. I'd moved into a crowded building, and suddenly I lived in an empty house, And then I met Myrta. Do you believe in past lives? We were in the lobby waiting for the elevator. This was right after the lockdown started. She asked, but I didn't say anything, which isn't the same as saying I didn't respond. I gave my tight little smile while looking down at my feet. I'm not rude, just fantastically shy. That condition doesn't go away, not even during a pandemic. I'm a Black woman, and people act surprised when they discover some of us can be awkward, too. There's no one else here, Myrta continued, so I must be talking to you. Her tone managed to be both direct and somehow still playful. As the elevator arrived, I looked toward her, and that's when I saw her shoes. Black and white pointed Oxfords. The white portion had been painted to look like piano keys. Despite the lockdown, Myrta had taken the trouble to slip on a pair of shoes that nice. I was returning from the supermarket wearing my raggedy old slides. I pulled the elevator door open and finally looked at her face. There she is, Myrta said, the way you might compliment a shy bird for settling on your finger. Myrta might have been 20 years older than me. I turned 40 the same month I moved into the building. My mom and dad called to sing happy birthday from Pittsburgh. Despite the news, they didn't ask me to come home, and I didn't make the request. When we're together, they ask me questions about my life, my plans, that turned me into a grouchy teenager again. My father ordered me a bunch of basics, though. He had them shipped. It's how he has always loved me, by making sure I'm well supplied. I tried to get toilet paper, Myrta said in the elevator. But these people are panicking, so I couldn't find any. They think a clean butt is going to save them from the virus? Myrta watched me. The elevator reached the 4th floor. She stepped out and held the door open. You don't laugh at my jokes, and you won't even tell me your name? Now I smile because it had turned into a game. A challenge, then, she said. I will see you again. She pointed down the hall. I'm in number 41. She let the elevator door go, and I rode up to the 6th floor, unpacked the things I'd bought. At that time, I still thought it would be all over by April. It's laughable now. I went into the bathroom. One of the things my dad sent me was 32 rolls of toilet paper. I slipped back down to the 4th floor and left 3 rolls in front of Myrta's door. A month later, I was used to logging into my remote office. The grid of screens, all our little heads, looked like the open office we once worked in. I probably spoke with my coworkers about as much now as I did then. When the doorbell rang, I leapt at the chance to get away from my laptop. Maybe it's Myrta. I slipped on a pair of buckled loafers. They were raggedy too, but better than the slippers I wore the last time she saw me. But it wasn't her. It was the super, Andres. Nearly 60, born in Puerto Rico, he had a tattoo of a leopard crawling up his neck. Still here, he said, sounding pleasant behind his blue mask. Nowhere else to go. He nodded and snorted, a mix between a laugh and a cough. The city says I got to check every apartment now, every day. He carried a bag that rattled like a sack of metal snakes. When I looked, he pulled it open. Silver spray paint cans. I don't get an answer, and I gotta use this. Andres stepped to the side. Down the hall, apartment 66. The green door had been defaced, with a giant silver V, so fresh, the letters still dripped. V, for virus? Andres' eyebrows rose and fell. Vacant, he said. That's a nicer way to put it, I guess. We stood quietly, him in the hall and me in the apartment. I realized I hadn't put on my mask when I answered, and I covered my mouth when I spoke. The city is making you do this? I asked. In some neighborhoods, Andres said. Bronx, Queens, Harlem, and us. Hotspots. He took out one of the cans and shook it. The ball bearing clicked and clacked inside. I'll knock tomorrow, he said. If you don't answer, I got the keys. I watched him go. How many people are left? I called out. In the building. He'd already reached the stairs, started down. If he answered, I didn't hear it. I walked onto the landing. There were 6 apartments on my floor. 5 doors had been decorated with the letter V. No one here but me. You'd think I would run right down to Myrta's place, but I couldn't afford to lose my job. The landlord hadn't said a word about rent forgiveness. I went back to the computer until the end of the day. I felt such relief when number 41 hadn't been painted. I knocked until Myrta opened. She wore her mask, just like me now, but I could tell she was smiling. She looked from my face to my feet. "Those shoes have seen better days," she said, and laughed so joyfully that I hardly even felt embarrassed. Myrta and I made trips to the supermarket together. 2 trips to the store each week. We walked side by side, arm's length apart, and when we crossed paths with others, we marched single file. Myrta talked the whole time, whether I was next to her or behind her. I know some people criticize chatty folks, but her chatter fell upon me like a nourishing rain. She came to New York from Cuba, with a short stay in Key West, Florida, in between. She'd lived in Manhattan, from the bottom to the top, over the span of 40 years. She played piano and idolized Perugin, had performed with Chucho Valdez, and now she gave lessons to children in her apartment for $35 an hour. Or at least she had done that, until the virus made it unsafe to have them over. I miss them, she said, every time we talked, as 4 weeks became 6, and 6 became 12. She wondered if she'd ever see her students and their parents again. I offered to help set up remote piano lessons. I'd use my job's account to set up free chat sessions for her. But this was 3 months in, and Myrta had lost her playful ways. She said, "The screens give the illusion that we're all still connected, but it's not true. The ones who could leave, left. The rest of us, we were abandoned." She stepped off the elevator. Why pretend? She scared me. I can see that now. But I told myself I'd become busier, as if I'd transformed. But I fled from her. We were all living on the ledge of despair, so when she said it, we were abandoned, why pretend? It was as if she spoke from down in that pit, a place I found myself slipping into often enough already. So I went to the store by myself, and I held my breath when the elevator passed the 4th floor. Meanwhile, Andres continued to work. I didn't see him. He knocked on the door each morning, and I knocked from the other side, but I saw the evidence of his work. 3 apartments on the 1st floor marked with a V one week. Next time I went to the store, the other 3 were painted. 4 on the 2nd floor, 5 on the 3rd. One afternoon, I heard him kicking at a door on the 4th floor, shouting a name I hardly recognized through the muzzle that was his mask. I left my place and walked down. Andres looked shrunken at the door of number 41. He kicked at it desperately. "Myrta!" he shouted again. He turned with surprise when I appeared. His eyes were red. The fingers of his right hand were entirely silver now. It looked permanent. I wondered if he'd ever be able to wash off the spray paint. But how could he, if the job was never done? "I left my keys," he said. "I gotta get them." "I'll stay," I said. He sprinted down the stairs. I stood by the door, didn't bother knocking. If that kicking didn't wake her, what could I do? Is he gone? I almost collapsed. "Myrta! Were you messing with him?" "No," she said through the door. "But I wasn't waiting on him. I was waiting around for you." I sat so my head was at about the same level as her voice. I heard her labored breathing through the door. "It's been a while," she finally said. I rested the side of my head against the cool door. "I'm sorry." She sniffed. Even women like us are scared of women like us. I lowered my mask, as if it were getting in the way of what I truly needed to say, but I still couldn't find the words. "Do you believe in past lives?" she said. "That's the first thing you ever asked me. When I saw you by the elevator, I knew we met before. Recognition, like seeing a member of my family." The elevator arrived. Andres stepped out. I raised my mask and got to my feet. He unlocked the door. "Be careful," I said. "She's right there." But when he pushed the door open, the hall sat empty. Andres found her in bed, dead. He came out carrying a bag, my name written on it. Her black and white Oxfords were inside. A note in the left shoe. "Give them back when you see me again." I have to slip on an extra pair of socks to make them fit, but I wear them everywhere I go. Odette. Zen Cho. Odette's time for hope was short. Early that morning, the first morning of the rest of her life, she'd gone out of her house to the end of the garden. The air was as pure as the breath that first animated the clay of Adam's flesh. She looked out over the island and saw no limitations. But then she saw him. Uncle Andrew in his polo shirt and khaki shorts, coming out for his daily morning walk. He pretended not to see her as he opened the gate and passed her by, but he knew she was there. Odette realized her life had not changed at all. She would have to live with Uncle Andrew for the rest of her life. He had only died the day before. Uncle Andrew had insisted on being discharged from the hospital. "If it is my time, I will die with dignity," he said. He spoke slowly, pausing between words to struggle for breath. A Christian shouldn't be scared of death. It wasn't Odette's place to disagree. Uncle Andrew's friends from church stepped in for her. "Andrew, God helps those who help themselves," said Auntie Gladys. "You are still so young. Don't you think it's too soon? Let the doctors treat you." "God can wait a while," said Auntie Po-ong. "He knows how much we all need you." All this was no less than what Uncle Andrew expected, but he was inflexible. "The doctors have had their chance. They poke me here, there, everywhere also. They still don't know how to cure me. God is calling me back to him. I'm not so foolish as to put my faith in humans over God." Auntie Po-ong took Uncle Andrew's hand. Her eyes were full of tears. "God has been good to let us have you for so long," she said. Auntie Po-ong was Odette's favorite of their church friends. Her only flaw was an unfailing affection for Uncle Andrew. But this was a flaw shared by all of Uncle Andrew's friends. It was not Odette's place to complain. Her place was by Uncle Andrew's side, except when she was in the laundry room or the kitchen or in the dining room polishing the heirloom silver. Just because Uncle Andrew was about to die didn't mean he was about to let standards slip. They had a cleaner who came in every day to go over the house, but the clothes Uncle Andrew wore and the food he ate had to come fresh from Odette's hands. As for the various antiques and other treasures Uncle Andrew had accumulated over the years, they could not, of course, be entrusted to a cleaner who only earned 600 ringgit a month. Uncle Andrew had collected enough that looking into the upkeep of his possessions, cooking for him, keeping him in clean clothes, and nursing him was too much for one person. Odette suggested that perhaps the cleaner could cook and do the laundry. "Then I can put 100% into looking after you and the house, Uncle." "You should already be putting in 100%, said Uncle Andrew. "Who is paying for you to live? Not like you have so much to do. When Beatrice was alive, she did all this and more. She didn't even have a degree, not like you. She never complained. You young people are spoilt, given too much." "Auntie Lachumi is a better cook than me. Maybe you'll feel like eating more, Uncle. It'll be good for your health." "Instead of learning to cook better, you want to pay someone else to do it," said Uncle Andrew. "You're useless. If not for my money, I don't know what you'd do. End up lying in the street like a tramp. I don't eat all this Indian food." If you don't want her to cook for you, what if we ask her to do the laundry? It will give me more time. What else are you doing with your life? Do you have a job? Do you have a husband? All you have to do is take care of your uncle, who has done so much for you. Even that you don't want to do. I sacrifice for you, and still you are so selfish. Odette was of the unfortunate mold, which does not grow less sensitive with time and use. She fell silent. Crying irritated Uncle Andrew to a fury. He took it as an unjustifiable assertion of self. "After I die, your life will be very easy," said Uncle Andrew. "My time left here is short, but you can't even wait until God takes me." He coughed. "I'm sorry, Uncle," said Odette. "There's no use saying sorry," said Uncle Andrew. "You shouldn't be so selfish in the first place. If your hand causes you to sin, cut it off." He banged the bedside table, but though Odette jumped, she wasn't really scared. 5 years ago, the force of the blow would have rocked the table back and forth on its legs. Now Uncle Andrew was so weak, it barely rattled the glass of water Odette had brought him. She watched the surface of the water tremble and go still, and hid a smile. Uncle Andrew only spoke this way when they were alone. His friends did not see this side of him. The friends watched Odette bring in meals, give Uncle Andrew his medicine, serve him hot drinks, fluff his pillow. They didn't see her change his bedsheets every day, bathe and dress him, do the laundry, eat only in the brief intervals granted her between chores, standing at the kitchen counter, stuffing the food into her mouth, dry-eyed. Auntie Po-ung told her, "You are taking Jesus' life as your model. Life is hard now, but God will reward you in the end." Odette only shook her head. "I don't need his reward, Auntie." After all, Uncle Andrew had always been so kind to her. He was known for his kindness, a pillar of the church, counselor to his friends, benign dispenser of advice to their children. It was all the more impressive in one who had done so well for himself. "Look at that beautiful house he lives in," said his friends, in the foothills overlooking the sea. The only tragedy in Uncle Andrew's life was that he had no children of his own. But then he had Odette. To Odette, his kindness had been wearingly comprehensive. It had covered sending her to university and insisting that she stay in his home for the duration of her course. He never asked for rent. She wouldn't have been able to pay it. In return for accommodations, she did the household chores. She hadn't minded staying at home for university. It had meant living with Uncle Andrew, but she was used to that. The house was almost enough to make up for it. It was the mansion of a 19th-century Peronican merchant. Uncle Andrew liked to give out, and seemed to half believe, that it had been in the family for generations, but he had bought it when he was in his 40s from the businessman's great-grandson. "Fella said he's an artist," Uncle Andrew snorted. "Cannot even hold on to the house his father gave him." Whatever he had been, the great-grandson had an eye for beauty. Upon Uncle Andrew's arrival, the house was exquisitely preserved. No incongruity had been permitted in it, no disruption to its elegant lines. Uncle Andrew had improved the plumbing and installed air conditioners in every room. He filled the house with big, ugly imitations of Western masterpieces, ludicrous photos of himself and Aunt Beatrice, and imposing jade sculptures he bought on trips to China. "I haggled them down to 500 ringgit from 3,000 ringgit. These Chinamen will skin you if you don't watch out." He replaced the Victorian tile flooring with marble, and brought in white leather sofas and glass coffee tables. But the bones of the house shone through these embellishments. Odette loved the graceful shuttered windows, the intricate latticed vents, the pillars topped with carvings of cranes and fruit. The very gutters were wonderful because they fit so well with the building. They had that perfection that comes from being impeccably appropriate. The beauty and intricacy of the house was such that it could sustain even the incongruity of Uncle Andrew's additions and turn them into something marvelous. The house was the only thing Odette loved. It was worth staying for. She'd made the mistake of trying to leave once. Right after she graduated from university, Auntie Beatrice died. It was sudden. Cardiac arrest, the doctor said. Odette understood that her aunt had finally given up. She had not known Auntie Beatrice well.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?